many ways, this law is working better than we expected it to. For all the misinformation campaigns, all the doomsday predictions, all the talk of death panels and job destruction, for all the repeal attempts, this law is now helping tens of millions of Americans.
Just because they wear long black robes and never crack a smile behind the bench doesn't mean U.S. Supreme Court justices are void of any snark. In the SCOTUS ruling 6-3 in favor of Obamacare, Justice Antonin Scalia made certain to write in his opinion that the justices have now ruled 4 times in favor of the law, rubbing it in the noses of those determined to see Obamacare wiped from existence. In the end, this case comes down to a pair of justices who turned out to be the true wild cards the president was likely always hoping for. Welcome back, as promised, the George Mason University Law School professor, author of The Once and Future King, The Rise of Crown Government in America, F.H. Buckley. Frank, thanks for joining us. I think earlier in the week we knew we would be here. However, did we know, or did you even guess, that it would be by the 6-3 count we saw?
Well, I thought it was 5-4. I think I called it right. I didn't know about Kennedy, and I think that's just that just tells you something about the case. I think it was a tragic miscue by conservatives to bring the case. There's never any good that comes from losing a case, and in this case it had the effect of pushing Kennedy over. As for Roberts, his decision I thought was entirely predictable. It was basically a replay of Sebelius from 3 years ago, this time on statutory interpretation, and the Chief Justice once again decided that Congress is going to have to be extraordinarily bad in drafting before they're not going to rescue it. He pulled out all the stops to rescue it 3 years back, and he did it again today.
With regard then to Justice Roberts, would you agree that the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court seems to have morphed into something that even the conservatives themselves never expected?
Well, I think so, but I think there's a logic to what he's doing. This was a case on statutory interpretation. In other words, real boring. Okay, but behind it was a principle of separation of powers. See, Scalia here said, on basic principles of statutory interpretation, send it back to Congress to fix it. Well, in our government today, Congress doesn't do anything. We're in gridlock. Things don't happen. I think that Roberts intuits that the modern view of looking at a statute is because things don't get fixed, we, the courts, will bend over backwards to interpret a statute so as to uphold its validity.
I think you probably said it best. If the court will now struggle to uphold a bad law, that means the government doesn't have a reverse gear. And once a bad law is passed, Frank, are we now pretty much stuck with it forever?
Well, there's going to come a point where we're almost stuck with Obamacare, and I have to tell you there are worse things in the world. Most countries that are ranked more free than the United States on economic rankings have some kind of version of Obamacare, some kind of health care. We're going to have to tinker with it. It's going to be a mess. It's going to become unplugged. But the basic principle is one that we may have to learn to live with in one way or another. And what we won't be listening to, I think, in the future so much are those think tanks and those people who say, oh, just give me a ton of money and I'm going to litigate this thing to death. That was a big mistake this time.
I got about 90 seconds left here. Would you agree then with those who say, okay, from the Republican side, we lost. Now let's go ahead and focus on 2016. We can fix this in the election. All we have to do is win the White House right now, and we can turn this around.
I agree with that, and I'd make, if I could, 2 other predictions. First of all, I think what happened today is you saw 2 very liberal decisions, and people are thinking the liberals are on a roll. I think they'll get a surprise tomorrow with respect to gay marriage, and I think that Kennedy will be looking a little more conservative tomorrow. And I think as well, the basic principle today was separation of powers, and we'll see a strong separation of powers case a year from now, where the court will strike down Obama's decision to extend amnesty to a bunch of undocumented aliens.
I got about 30 seconds left here. In light of what we saw in this decision, how fearful are you about this court moving forward with what you and others look at as nothing more than just bad interpretations and not doing their job?
I don't see that at all. I see the court trying to play a form of judicial politics with all of this, but, you know, the court struck down a bunch of Obama's decisions 9-zip, and I think they're primed to do so again with respect to a decision from Texas about immigration and the president's prerogative. I'm looking for the courts to try to rescue the separation of powers, and that, from that perspective, a year from now, today it'll look like a lot smaller matter.
I want to remind everybody once again that the book is called The Once and Future King, The Rise of Crown Government in America, that many people feel like we are already seeing at this very moment indeed. The author is Frank Buckley. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. I look forward to the next time we talk.
Ed, thank you so much.
All right,
Great
take
talking.
care. Coming up next, well, the White House will never tell you about the now surviving Obamacare. It's next when we continue on the fastest 60 minutes in news.